Welcome to the Jaco Report. I'm Charles Jaco. After squeaking out a win in a four-way Democratic primary, Lewis Reed is guaranteed to have a fourth term as president of the St. Louis Board of Aldermen. It was a nasty campaign, but the campaign may just be a preview of the issue Reed faces as one of the three most powerful people in St. Louis city government. A high school and college wrestler and a math major who had made a career in the world of IT and computer systems, Reed will need a wrestler's toughness and an IT geek's technical skill to navigate the issues ranging from a proposed merger of the city and county under the Better Together proposal to a plan to privatize Lambert Airport, the shrinking of the Board of Aldermen from 28 to 14 seats, a police force that often seems out of control, a professional soccer stadium downtown, crime, and a city whose population continues to get smaller. President Reed, very good to have you here. Welcome to the Jaco Report. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Charles. I appreciate you.
During the campaign, you said that as it sits right now, you're against the Better Together unification proposal.
Yes.
What changes would be needed to make for you to support it?
Well, first off, I think we have to really take a look at the fact that the state would be making the decisions for us as a region. The structure of the board of freeholders and the structure of government that they're proposing, I think we would have to see if, how those things would.
So the statewide vote is one of the things that's a non-starter for you?
The statewide vote is non-starter. The way the revenue and debt structures are set up within the whole system, and what the city would have to do to fund its basic operations, that is problematic, I think, to me and others. So there are numerous things within the plan as it sits that I think are problematic. Now, and then on the other side, you look at some of the data that they've been able to gather, the fact that we have 55 separate police departments, 18 different life expectancies just throughout the region. So, it's obvious that we could all benefit from coming together and pooling of resources and addressing our issues on a regional basis, and working to just streamline operations. The overlap is just killing us.
Yeah, I was glad you brought that up because a lot of people don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater with Better Together. They realize something needs to be done.
Yeah.
But if you go deep into the weeds of the process itself, it strikes a lot of people as profoundly undemocratic that this thing came out of nowhere, was developed in secret with money from a rather reclusive conservative billionaire, and then suddenly presented on a plate to the public. Does that aspect of it bother you? Do you think this could have been better handled by more transparency, public hearings, and then coming out with the idea? Or do you think this was a good way to handle it?
I think, obviously, more transparency is always better, right? There's never any good that comes out of, it's hard. Don't want to speak in the absolute, but I would have to say rarely is there any good that comes out of a situation where they have not included the entire public, right? And sought out their views and made them feel part of the planning process, but then also part of the solution. So right now what you have is a plan that's been put out there, but the people who really should own it and say, okay, this is our plan and we want to see it get done, they don't feel any ownership in it because they have not been part of developing it.
Do you think the city is being made a scapegoat in the Better Together plan? Because I note that all of the cities in the county would continue to exist as so-called municipal districts. They'd get to elect their own mayors and city councils, and the city of St. Louis is just vaporized. It vanishes.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that they work to deliver to the 80-plus municipalities in the county to get some buy-in from those municipalities.
In other words, they wouldn't buy in unless you destroyed the city?
I think it is a much harder sale for them to have the counties join this plan if indeed they feel like they wouldn't have any control over the course and direction of the city of St. Louis. I think it isn't any surprise to anybody that when folks in the county, they look at our schools and they say, okay, your schools need help and infrastructure issues because we are the oldest municipality in the region, right? So we have, our infrastructure is older, and bridges, streets. There's a lot more work to be done in the city than it is in the county.
Do you think the Better Together plan can be salvaged? I mean, right now, if just based anecdotally, all three of the people, the main contenders running for Board of Alderman President, were against it. I would say the majority of people in St. Louis County are against it. And what do you think could possibly be done the way this thing sits to save it, or do you think they need to toss it out and just start over from square one?
Charles, I've been saying for years that what they needed to do, even years ago, they needed to begin to enter into cooperative agreements, right? Right now, like even today, they should be focused on these cooperative agreements. And not just enter into a cooperative agreement, but take a snapshot of where we stand. Take a snapshot of the amount of resources. Let's say we're going to do a cooperative agreement on our health departments, right? Take a snapshot on the services that are being delivered, the cost of services that are being delivered, the efficiencies, and also the outcomes, and publish that. Then you enter into a cooperative agreement, and then across that year or 2 years, whatever period of time, you report out how much more efficiently the system is operating, what our cost is, and what that means to each and every person that lives within the district. So if you did that, you remove the mystery out of it. And you soften the beachhead, and people understand, okay, this is what I'm buying into, and this is why this is important.
So in your mind, it would be better to enter into these cooperative agreements between the city and the county on various things, let it run for a few years, see what the results are, and then take it from there rather than to rush into it with this Better Together plan.
Absolutely. Like our public safety service, we can adopt a regional public safety plan. We can adopt we can put into place a cooperative agreement that brings together various different aspects of the city's police department and their training, and the St. Louis County's police department and its training, and all the municipalities, right? We do, at East West Gateway, we passed a One St. Louis Regional Sustainability Plan, right? So now we have an overarching sustainability plan that stretches across the city and the county. You look at the issue with the homeless, right? We have, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in the city of St. Louis and various different federal state grants, right, to address the issues of homelessness. We should be addressing that on a regional basis. So let's enter into something with the county today and have a regional approach on these things. But we cannot do it in the dark. We have to have a regional approach. It has to be advertised as such, and people have to understand what it means to them personally and how are we better together with it.
Rather than being presented to you on a platter by a rather secretive group that put the thing together. Lambert privatization. A lot of talk going around about privatizing Lambert Airport. The only airport in the United States now that is privatized is the San Juan, Puerto Rico airport. They tried to privatize Midway Airport twice, and it failed.
Well, it failed. The financing failed. It's not like they privatized it and it failed.
So
the financing
are you in favor of privatization of the airport?
I have to, Charles. I address all these things and look at them very pragmatically, and I think we need to do that. I think
to privatize.
No, I think we need to look at big issues like this in a very pragmatic way. It is very popular, especially today, to say that absolutely no matter what a deal looks like, I'll never support a deal like that. And I think that to say that and to have that position is almost like malpractice, because we're at the same time we need money for our schools, we need money for infrastructure, we have a high crime rate, murder rate that we have to get under wraps, we have a higher unemployment rate that we have to address. All these things, none of these things we can address with an empty bucket, right? So here's the thing. What we're doing now, we're looking at what a privatization deal would look like, right? Once we have that information, then all of us have information we can make a decision on. When we look at airports like Midway, they've tried to put the financing together and close on it multiple times, and they have not been able to actually close. One time was when the stock market crashed, right? And we entered into that great recession that we all lived through. That was one of the things that killed one of their more recent deals. So what we're doing now, we're looking at it. We're looking at what a privatization deal looks like. Our current situation is this. And airport privatization, people look at it as a sale. But what it is
it's a lease.
It's a lease. It's a long-term lease agreement with a private operator. So, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask. I mean, do you think that the bucket of cash St. Louis would get up front or yearly from this would be worth privatizing a city function like the airport? I mean, just theoretically.
Theoretically, here's our situation. We get roughly $6 million a year into our general fund. We will never get any more than that. So if we take, our big win last year was Wow Airlines showed up. 6 months later, Wow Airlines was gone. Gone, right? That was our big win last year, right? And it's taken years to get that win, and it evaporated overnight. Our situation is this. We get roughly $6 million a year into our general fund because of airport funds being restricted funds. So we don't have any control over that. If we quadruple the traffic out there, or 100%, if we increase the traffic out there by 100%, we would still only get that $6 million. That $6 million never changes. Meanwhile, we have about $600 million in debt. So it would take us 100 years just to pay off our debt if we gave back the $6 million. I mean, so
it's worth studying at least.
Yeah.
Do you think there should be a public vote?
Yeah. Because here's the thing: if you present it to the public, and if it's something that's good and worthy, the public will vote to support it. So I don't think anybody should be afraid of that, right? But just some of the numbers they're looking at, they said it could be up to $2 billion or something.
There's been a lot of criticism about the mechanism that's being used to look at privatization.
Yeah.
Because the consultants, in my understanding, would not get paid to the city unless the airport is privatized. We had a transportation expert on this program who said that seems to be a clear conflict of interest because you're setting up a financial incentive for these guys to recommend that it be privatized, otherwise they're not going to be paid.
No,
do you think that's a weakness in the study of this?
It was absolutely a weakness in the original deal. The contracts, when the contracts came to my office, we sent it out and got an independent review on it, and the review came back. And across a period of a month or so, we ended up with 863 changes in the contract to address issues like what you just brought up. The way the structure is set up is the funds that pay all of the independent consultants and stuff. Those funds were backed by an independent party. Mm-hmm. The consultants are all getting paid through the scope of the deal. The only way the funds are refunded back to the party that donated them, the guy that originally donated them, is if indeed we actually decide to go forward with a deal. So what we decided to do was what we forced into the contract was, number one, breaking up the original consulting group into 3 separate pools, bringing in some additional experts that truly understood the deal, but and the structure of airports and how you put these things together. We forced that change into it, but we also put 2 outside entities on the outside of the deal that have no incentive, right? To do nothing but to advise the city. And the 2 entities are Stiefel Nicholas. They one of the largest. They do large municipality deals all across this country. One of the largest ones in the line of business that they're in. and also Greenberg Trauck. And Greenberg is one of the largest law firms, not just in the country, but in the world.
So you think these problems have pretty much been taken care of right now?
Yes, the way we structured it, the flow of information has to go from the consultants through these outside entities, and these outside entities will vet all the data back and forth from the raw information and also provide balanced information back to the city.
One quick final thing on both that ties together both Better Together and Lambert privatization. There are a lot of concerns by a lot of people that the drive to privatize Lambert and the idea of Better Together all came from billionaire Rex Sinquefield, a conservative, a libertarian, a guy who believes in reducing government services, reducing taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And they said that that seems profoundly undemocratic and frankly rather creepy that this one man has his tentacles into all these things that could affect the individual life of St. Louis. Does that bother you that a lot of this traces back to one very secretive, very rich individual?
You know, no, this is the same guy that funded the plan that allowed us to get local control of our police department, right? You know, he's the same guy that's, you know, funding, you know, chess programs through our public schools and all that stuff. So the way I look at it is this: should we automatically reject everything because
Sinquefield is involved?
Sinquefield involved. I think we should cautiously approach anything, no matter who's on the other side of it, whether it's Sinquefield or you know, or Donald Trump or anybody. We should cautiously approach those things where we can find, you know, wins in there for the people of the city of St. Louis. I think we should, you know, approach it, and if we can find a win in there, then let's find one, like we did with the police department, local control of the police department. But absolutely, we should be cautious.
Speaking of the police, yeah, it's no news to anybody that recently it seemed to a lot of people that the St. Louis Police Department is out of control. You've had federal indictments. You've had 28 guys whom the circuit attorney says are liars, so their cases can't even be brought to court. You've got that Russian roulette case that no one I talks to believes that that's what happened. You've had other cops being arrested for, you know, shooting a guy outside of a bar. The list continues. Now, the mayor and the chief to whom I've spoken both said essentially everything's fine. These are a few bad apples, and you're just dealing with individual bad behavior. But if you pile up individual stones, sooner or later you get a mountain. If you pile up enough individual bad behavior, doesn't that paint a picture of a police department culture that is tolerating racist behavior, violent behavior, and unprofessional behavior, and that there needs to be something done with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department?
Our public safety director, you know, having been in the courts for so many years, having, you know, opened a school for troubled kids and all this stuff, right? He understands the dynamics within the police department and the community. And he has done, you know, I think a really good job of beginning to clean out and change that culture. That culture's been in place for so many years.
So you agree that there's a cultural problem, not just a bunch of individuals?
There has to be, you know, something else there, and I'm happy that the current public safety director is approaching it in a comprehensive manner to address those things. But and here's the other challenge we have, Charles. I think it is a mistake to paint all of it, every single person within the department, because you do have some good police officers within the department too. But the culture, but you know, there's something there that is not in sync with what best, let's just say, best practices.
And that gets me to my final question, and I'm sorry we're out of time, but that gets to the issue of crime. If you've got a police department that is compromised by charges of racism, by charges of excess use of force and brutality, by a tsunami of lawsuits, by charges by the circuit attorney, for heaven's sake, that a number of them are unreliable liars, by federal indictments, it seems to a lot of people that a police department that is that compromised professionally and maybe morally is incapable of functioning as a professional law enforcement organization to fight the number one issue on the minds of a lot of people in St. Louis, especially in the poorer neighborhoods, which is their personal safety and crime. I mean, do you think that's the case, that the St. Louis Police Department, because of that culture, this gets in the way of it being an effective professional law enforcement organization?
Look, because of some of that culture that obviously exists, obviously that is having an impact on the department's effectiveness, right? But again, I have to say that Judge Edwards has really begun to change that culture. So I think that we're going to continue to see some of those changes happen. But to truly address this issue of public safety, we need an overarching end-to-end comprehensive public safety plan. It cannot just be where we're reliant on just the police department to deliver that, because that arrest incarceration model has been shown not to work all across this country. But when we begin to deploy other services like you find in Operation Ceasefire, Operation Cure Violence, where we bring in all of our partners, all the nonprofits, so we have a clean service delivery mechanism, and all sorts of members of law enforcement, the feds, the Justice Department, the police department, the court systems, everybody that has to do with that end, and elected officials and neighborhood groups, and begin to communicate with the handful of groups that are committing the most violent crimes within your community. When you begin to do that, you begin to transform those offenders, right? And you create a healthier, more sustainable community, right? And you drive down this crime rate. So you were able to get in front of the retaliatory shootings and all that stuff, right? But right now, there's no information moving between, let's just say, the streets, right, and this whole entity, right? And once you get over to, the nonprofits, the city, the court systems, there isn't any clean service delivery mechanism over there. So let's say a certain class of jobs would help within a group in the city of St. Louis. How can you connect that group to those services? Right now, the mechanism doesn't exist. But if we had this overarching plan, if we had Operation Ceasefire, Operation Cure Violence in place, all of a sudden you have it in place, and you have a data-driven plan, and your decision-making becomes less about policy and more about the data driving the policy.
Very quickly, do you think people, citizens of St. Louis, especially black folks, do not want to cooperate with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, partially because they're scared of the gunslingers in their neighborhood? But do you think a big part of the reason is they just don't trust the police because of this culture we were talking about?
Oh, absolutely. The relationship and the trust didn't exist, right?
Doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. But that's why programs that's why community policing and all these things, those things have to be in place. I think one of the biggest mistakes we made a few years ago was when we began to move police officers around even more rapidly than they were being moved around before. So our community never really had an opportunity to create a relationship or a trusting connection with the police department. Look, if somebody shows up at your door and you don't have the means to just pick up and move your family somewhere else, and you've seen somebody shot on your block, and you've seen this kind of thing happen before, and they show up on your doorstep and say, "Can you tell me everything that happens?" Going through the back of your mind, you have to think, okay, first, first I have to think about the safety of my family, right? And I don't know you, and I don't know what you're going to do with the information. That's real.
And I've heard all kinds of stories about how your department operates, and I'm not real anxious to be part of that.
Exactly, and that's real, right? We cannot change a system by denying those things that are real in people's minds, and that's real, and that has to be addressed head on, right? And you certainly can't address it by having transient police officers moving. You're in this neighborhood this week, you're in that neighborhood, and then we have to change how and why we promote officers, right? So we need to shift to a model that begins to promote officers based on their relationships and things that they've built within the community, because then that will drive behavior.
And on that, we're going to wrap it up. Board of Aldermen President Louis Reed, thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate it. Our thanks to Louis Reed for joining us, and our thanks to you for being here too. Please join us right back here next week for another edition of the Jaco Report. See you then.